What if I told you that there are 2 Airbnbs on one single street? One property makes $100,000 a year in free cash flow. The other property is losing $20,000 every single year. I'm going to take a guess that you want to be the property that is actually making money. And don't worry, I have an expert on today to tell you the exact data-driven science behind finding profitable Airbnbs or short-term rentals in today's market and not ending up like the one that is losing their shirt every single year. This is one big, beautiful episode, and we're going to talk about making your short-term rental into a long-term profitable success today. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Bigger Stays episode. My name is Garrett Brown. I'm the Bigger Pockets resident STR expert. And today we have one of my favorite experts in the field on, John Bianchi, who you might know as the Airbnb data guy. John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I love being here.
Yeah, likewise. We love all the content you put out. And I tell people all the time, if they really want to get into some data-driven decisions, and the data-driven decisions, that's a tough word, tough 3 words to say.
Yeah, it is, eh?
In the short-term rental world, like, you are the epitome of that because you have broken it down for over years and you have processes and you really make decisions not off of emotion, off of true data numbers that investors can go off of, which is why I love your content, why I was super excited to have you back on. And today we've got a few topics we're going to try to hit. But one of the big ones I wanted to start with, because I'm sure you have been feeling it, pretty much every other investor out there that I've talked to in the short-term rental world has been thinking about it or feeling it, is the one beautiful big bill or the bonus depreciation 100% that has come back, and how everybody is trying to buy a property and take advantage of it and figure out what loophole, in quotation marks, this is. But can you explain to somebody that is listening to this that doesn't have too much of an idea of what exactly changed with the 100% bonus depreciation coming back, and also what people are not paying attention to with this when they're actually like going out looking at properties? Hit me with a little bit of guidance here, because I know you know it to the T of how you can help people.
Yeah, I appreciate the intro. So the main thing I want to talk about is, what is the STR tax loophole in the first place, and why you should be scared of it. Or, you know what, I do want to scare people, because I think if I scare people, it'll actually make them do the work that they need to properly do. But the reality is, there's a lot of people screwing up because of this tax motivator, let's call it. So I'm going to break down what that tax motivator is, sort of how it works, and then we're going to jump into what mistakes people are making and how you can avoid making those mistakes yourself. Okay. I'm seeing it every single day right now. So that's why I'm just trying to make sure I can stress it as much as I possibly can. There's been this strategy. It is called a loophole, but it's just because that's what you call tax saving strategies. They're all called loopholes, right? For whatever reason. I know loophole doesn't have the best name, but the reality is it's called the STR tax loophole, right? The short-term rental tax loophole. And the reality is that if you own an Airbnb and meet certain requirements, it could actually be used to offset your active income through a cost segregation. I'm not going to try and explain every single last detail of what I just said. All you need to know is, do you make a W-2 paycheck or active income? Yes. Okay, well then an Airbnb could potentially wipe that all out, and then you pay $0 in taxes. On my website, you can go and learn more about it. You can type in, learn in all these different places, right? But that's the gist of it. Now, this strategy relies on something called a bonus depreciation, which essentially means your property is depreciating and the government allows you to take 100% of the depreciation that's going to happen to that property and use it all in year one. Now, what was happening before the big beautiful bill changed all this is that was actually phasing out. It used to be 100%, then went down to 80, then 60, then 40, it's going to get to 40, and then it was going to be gone, right? But now the big beautiful bill brought that back, and everyone's taking advantage of it and kind of using this as a reason to get into Airbnbs, because it is kind of nuts, right? You buy one Airbnb, you meet certain requirements, all of a sudden you don't have to pay $100,000 in taxes, and you can use that money to put towards something else and into the economy. It's a beautiful thing that they did. Genuinely, it's an awesome thing. But the mistake that I see everybody making is, because they now have this huge motivator of I don't want to pay taxes, I'm going to buy an Airbnb. They're going out and buying the dumbest Airbnbs on the block. They're going into it with zero knowledge, zero experience, zero data, working to try and make sure they're getting the best possible property, budgets that aren't enough. And then they're buying the property, getting the tax savings, and then they're going to lose money year after year after year with these properties, to eventually to the point where their entire tax savings have been wiped out, but they had to work for 3 to 4 years to make that happen. And then they're going to be in a position where where they're going to have to sell the property. And really, real estate only makes the most amount of sense when you can hold it for as long as possible or sell at the most advantageous time. And so if your property is losing money year after year after year, you're going to eventually just sell it. That most likely will not be the most optimal time. And so then therefore, the reality is what you have to do is try to study Airbnb data. It exists out there. It's not as complicated as people may think it is. Learn it, learn what to look for, learn what to avoid, learn how to make sense of it. And then when we're coming across these properties, you truly understand, what property is a good property, which ones to avoid, how much money it's going to take to be able to compete against your competition. And then you get the right property, set it up properly, market it properly, manage it properly. And then you're going to hit your cash flow on an annual basis. And now all of a sudden, this tax strategy is just the cherry on top that got you all the way through. So that's what we can break down today in more detail.
So wait, you're telling me that all these Airbnb gurus that are telling everyone to just go buy a short-term rental and you're going to save $100,000 on taxes and you don't even have to think about it. You're telling me they're wrong? I'm shocked. I just can't believe that's happening.
Who would have thought?
I'm so glad you're pointing out that, because that has been one of my biggest irks that I've had recently, is seeing so many people just like, even in the Bigger Pockets forums, I'll see people like, hey, I need to take advantage of the short-term rental tax loophole. Like, where can I buy a place and make it? And then they just will go. Even I have a few co-hosting clients, which I hope they don't listen to this. I'm not involved, but they went out and did that. And I wasn't involved with the prior purchase or even anything. They didn't find me till after, but I had to, give them a stark reality of like, after I got brought on, of like, hey, we're going to do the best we can to make this, but this property probably shouldn't have been an Airbnb. And there's a chance that you might wipe out all those savings you got in a few years, even with like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but we're a great management company and marketing company, and we still would struggle to get some of these to the top of market to where they exactly need to be. So I'm glad you said that, so people stop just going try to buy whatever. And, if you don't get it this year, it's okay. You don't have to buy a property just to buy one, like make an informed decision, which is part of what we're going to talk about today with your company, STR Search. And y'all kind of have a data first driven process. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of broken down into 6 steps that you kind of follow pretty much every single time.
5. But there's steps within the steps, so it goes deeper and deeper. But yeah.
Okay, well let's break. I might have one extra then too, so we'll go off that. So riff me if I'm wrong. So the first one is choosing the right market, which so everybody, what that means to everybody is different. But as somebody that studies pretty much every single market around the country and has a very high level knowledge of it, what should investors look for in a strong STR market in 2025? But also going into 2026, because that door might have closed for 2025 for some people, especially by the time they've seen this too. So break that down a little bit.
The first thing that everyone's trying to do is like find a market that they actually want to open up a Airbnb in. And a lot of people just pick markets that they're comfortable with. And the vast majority of markets don't make for good Airbnb markets, right? So as an example, I wish I have studied every single last market in America. That'd be awesome. But I'm at about like 400 plus right now.
You're probably more than anybody I know, so you can take it.
Yeah, and when I say 400 plus, sometimes like Michigan is one. You know what I mean? So like, there's probably closer to like 500-600 at this point. But the reality is, I only really know like 20 markets in America where there are truly like strong cash flowing Airbnbs. Now, there's a good amount of them. There's definitely one-off markets all over the place. I've come across them, and if you're really good, you take the risk, it can happen. But the reality is that the vast majority of these markets don't make good Airbnbs. And so what happens is like, especially once you start to tell yourself like, I'm actually going to use data to make this decision and I'm going to follow John's process. And then you go and look at the market that's like your favorite vacation market. And then you realize, oh, there's nothing that's going to cash flow here. And then you have to go, okay, well, where do I go next? Right. And that's where people really get tripped up. And it's the process I want to walk you through on like how to think about markets. All right. So first off, pick something you like. If you like the mountains, go to the mountains. If you like the beaches, go to the beaches. There's definitely places that will cash flow in each of those different types of markets, okay? The next thing you want to do is make sure there's regulations already in place. That's the easiest one. You don't want there to be no regulations because they're going to bring something out. You don't want there to be strict regulations where they don't allow it because then you're just buying something illegal right from day one. But you want essentially there to be rules in place and then you follow those rules, right? Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to try and go into that market and at a very high level, determine if the market has has any cash flow ability or not? Yes or no, okay? How do we figure out if a market from a 10,000 foot view has cash flow? You use something called the 20% rule. This is going to get complicated. I've been trying to explain this for years in a really straightforward way, and I never nail it. So
I think our audience is going to get it because I saw your video a couple of days ago where you talked about the 1% rule, or like used to be like. I think you explain it better than anybody. So explain the 20% rule because I think it makes perfect sense.
Sounds good. So I have this rule where when I look into a market, I want to be able to see that the revenue potential for a property is going to be roughly 20% of the purchase price. So if I'm buying a property for $500,000, right? There's something for sale for $500,000. I want to see that there's the ability for it to make $100,000. And if I can see that ratio from again, 10,000 foot view, I'm not like deep diving this, 10,000 foot view. I look on Zillow and I can see that there's some properties for 500,000. I look over onto Airbnb at the good data and I realize like, okay, there's actually some properties here that look like this one that's for sale for 500,000 that's making 100,000. I go, okay, that's the 20% rule there. There's most likely properties that cash flow well within this market. Therefore, it is worth deep diving and truly understanding, right? So that's how you use a 20% rule. And I'm just going to state this. It's not 20% cash on cash. It is just the purchase price compared to the revenue potential. The amount that will cash flow is an amount that you'll be happy with, that almost everybody that we work with is happy with. There's nuances to that rule, but from a 10,000 foot view, it gets the job done, right? You do that, you look into the market and you're like, cool, I see properties that meet that criteria. Now let's deep dive it. But if you don't see that, which is going to be the vast majority of the time, you just mark it off your list and say, nope, not worth deep diving. And then you move on. So that's a simple process. Be in a place you like with good regulation, see if it meets the 20% rule, add it to your short list of places you're going to deep dive, and then carry on.
I know for a fact, because I talk with John pretty good bit here and there, of the markets that he knows about that can do this. And I don't ask him to give them out because he does that for his clients. But I know for a fact this guy is one of the few people that can actually knows of where these markets exist. You think in your head that you'll think of, Gulf Shores, Alabama or something. Like there's markets out there that actually can hit this rule. So if you're curious of what that is about, John is the guy to talk to, and we're not going to dive into them today, but I guarantee you he has quite a few of them that could work for you. And that leads into, so people say somebody works with you, they pick their market. What's next? Is that when they start to build your buy box? Is that the next step correctly? So talk like what's a buy box and how does it save investors from like a shiny object syndrome that they can get into?
Once you've selected a market, or say you see that there's cash flow potential within that market, well, now you want to like truly break down that market, which essentially just means study every single Airbnb that is there and understand why one's doing better than the other. Because in every single market, you're gonna have a whole bunch of 3 bedrooms. Some will be doing significantly better than the others. And your job is to understand why. Why is this one making 120? Why is this one making 80? They're both 3 bedrooms in the exact same market, but there's a $40,000 difference in the revenue. If you can truly understand what's the difference between the two, you'll understand what drives revenue within that market, and then you just make a note of it. And you go, the one doing 120 has a hot tub and a fire pit. The one that's doing 80 doesn't. And you go, okay, I just checked those things off. You can see that there's clearly a difference between them. That's the difference. If I add a hot tub in this, I'll most likely do 120, right? That's the most simple way I can possibly explain it. Of course, there's so many other variables there. But essentially what you're doing is you're just repeating this process of figuring out what are the revenue drivers for a listing. And one thing that I've always avoided saying, which I'll share right now, is that the objective is actually to find the ugliest property that has the highest revenue. And when I mean ugly, ugly is not actually the right word. It is the least sexy building structure, okay? Not listing. The listing's going to be beautiful, but it's going to be a house that's nothing special. The kitchen's going to be small. It's going to have siding rather than be a log cabin. It's going to be the most boring property that you could buy, that if you were to buy that one, it'd be a fraction of the cost in comparison to the other ones that are for sale within that market. But yet, for whatever reason, the revenue on that property is significantly higher than anything comparable to it. And it actually matches up with more of those luxury properties. That piece of data is my favorite out of anything. And there's one in almost every single market that you're going to come across. And that one tells that person, that host, is doing everything right. They're driving the most amount of revenue out of that property. And the more that you can understand why their property is outperforming the other ones, the better you will understand what drives revenue within that market. And then you can emulate that success and potentially see a similar type of return by doing the same thing.
You hit the nail on the head with that one, because I think going on the shiny object syndrome thing, people all the time are, like kind of lazy on some things and look for the easiest thing. They think they're going to buy a turnkey rental, and it could work out well depending on a few factors, but there's also, you're buying at the top of market. You're buying for all the stuff that previous owner did to that property too. So you already hit it on the head. And I think I might butcher the numbers a little bit, but me and you talked recently, and you had a case study of a house that was about $42,000 on a street, and a house that cost about $2 million. And the one that was 842.
Yeah, you want me to?
Yeah, hit me with it. I'm sure I'm butchering it, so hit me with it. I was so shocked.
You said 142, and I'm like, nope.
842, my bad.
There you go. There you go.
But break it down for me. Hit me with it.
Of course. So I helped my client find this one property. They bought it for $842,000. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. It's got a good sized backyard, right? There's another property literally down the street, sold for less than a year later for $2 million. It's more of a luxury property. So the kitchen's a lot nicer, but the backyard's roughly the same. Actually, the backyard is bigger, but it feels more luxurious. Naturally, it's a $2 million property compared to 842. Not kidding, less than 5 minutes away from each other, right? They're neighbors in a sense, but they're both same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, same size backyard, stuff like that. The property that I helped my client get set up is it's technically close to 275, but for this example, $250,000 a year. The other property that was bought for $2 million is doing $190,000 a year. There's a $60,000 difference. And if you saw these two, when you truly looked at me, let me just share my screen. I want people to see this so they can see that I'm not making this stuff up, right? These two properties here, the one on the left, see that kitchen there? Right? That's not a luxury kitchen at all. You look at the one on the right, that's a luxury kitchen. Massive island, really nice appliances, stuff like that, significantly larger. This is the $2 million property. The one on the left is the $842,000 property, right? And here's the actual screenshots of these ones. So 842 in 2023, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,200 square feet. This one, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, $260,000 and a $2 million purchase, right? But they're down the street. And the one on the left, and I hate that we have it set up this way, but the true revenue on this one on the left is closer to 275, but let's say it's 250. That means that the cash flow is close to $100,000 in free cash flow. The one on the right, it's showing 225, but it's actually closer to 190. And that means that it's actually losing roughly about $20,000 plus a year, right? Losing. So one makes $100,000, one loses $100,000.
Same street, right?
Yeah, right down the street from each other. And people are like, well, why? How? What do you mean, right? And this is what they don't understand, is that within Airbnb, it's about creating an experience. And there's also certain things that you have to have that allow you to drive revenue. And if you can study a market enough, you can truly understand what are the revenue drivers. That's what I'm talking about. That's why we build a buy box. So we understand what moves the needle within that market. What demographic is traveling there the most? Of those demographic, which ones are willing to pay the most? And then how can we create an experience for them that is truly going to drive the most amount of revenue? What are other people currently doing within that general area that's allowing that to happen? And how can we take the best pieces of all of those and mash it all together in one specific listing and, use the colors that allow those demographics to know that this property has been designed for them, and really not cut corners, but put it together in a chef kiss sort of way, because then what ends up happening is it doesn't matter what the kitchen looks like anymore, right? And who cares that it's not a pretty kitchen? We're walking into a Disneyland, essentially. You know what I mean? Disney World, we step in here, who cares what that kitchen looks like? And now all of a sudden you can get the same revenue number in comparison to somebody who's leaning on the fact that they're luxury to be able to drive revenue. But you bought it for half the price and you cash flow over $100,000 more in comparison. Nuts, eh?
That's what happens when you actually make data-driven decisions and you're not just, looky-loo on Zillow, oh, this one might be a good one. Oh, let's take a chance. It's no, this is real estate investment meets the hospitality business, and they had a baby, and then now you'd have multiple levers that you have to pay attention to when you're making data-driven decisions. And you nailed it on the head with all that. And that's one of my favorite examples of why being critical in the small details of what you're doing and why you're doing it in short-term rentals is huge, because it can make or break Like the fact that somebody can have a house for $150,000 that is making more money than the $2 million property nearby is just kind of mind blowing. And I'm sure people hear that and they're like, there's just no way that's true. But I promise this is what happens when you follow John's actual process. So
This is what I live for.
you do this just a little bit. So, so you got your buy box and all that set up now. And then the next step is staying disciplined in your hunt, basically. So how do you filter deals that don't fit, even if you're in like a hot market? Like, how do you know that this, like a property isn't going to be the one, or is any telltale signs, or how do you go about that?
Well, the easiest one is like, when you build out this buy box, you have an idea of how much a 4-bedroom could potentially make, right? So there's sort of like this ceiling of like, if we did everything right, we would make X amount. Well, you then reverse engineer the 20% rule, or, actually underwrite it. There's the 20% rule. Once you go, a higher purchase price, it can actually come down to like 15%. And when you go to a lower purchase price of like 300,000, it has to go up to like a 25%. So it kind of fluctuates a little bit, but you could let's say that the property in this market can make $200,000 if you did everything right. Then you go, okay, what's the max amount of a property I could purchase? Like what's the most I could pay and still hit the numbers I'd be happy with? Well, then you just filter out everything that's above that, right? You go, okay, I don't want to see any of that. And then you also know that, with this property, it actually needs to be a minimum of 4 bedrooms. And if it does have 4 bedrooms, you need to like convert something to a 5th bedroom. So, all right, so now I can only look at 4 bedrooms, right? So you get rid of everything else. And then you go, well, it can't be in an HOA. It also needs to have a pool. It actually needs a view on top of that. And I need the square footage to be a pretty decent size so I can have like that extra game room that's needed in there. Therefore, I can't look at anything that's under 2,000 square feet. And so what you've just done there is you've added so many requirements. And then you also maybe even drew a little circle within the area that you're on Zillow. And you're saying only within this box. And so now you've narrowed it down so much that when Zillow spits out properties that meet your requirement, the chances of those being successful Airbnbs go through the roof. However, that's not where you end. That's not where you stop, right? Because there's not enough filters to like Zillow doesn't give you enough options to like completely nail it. So from there, what you do when you're hunting is you're opening up those properties one by one and you go, which one of these properties has the biggest moat around it? Right? Which one has the most leverage that I can pull to drive more revenue? Like, as an example, I had somebody show me their property one time and they're like, hey, it's not hitting the numbers I wanted to hit. And I was like, okay. And then they showed me a property they were trying to emulate, right? And I look at the property and the property has a giant backyard filled with amenities. I go and look at their property. The backyard like drops off a cliff. And I'm like, how did you expect to compete with these people when they're selling, like they have 10 more amenities in their backyard, which means they're selling 10 more things than you, even though they're, renting, you're really selling it for a couple of days. So then therefore, how would you ever do as well as them if they're selling more things? Like if you put that concept in anything else, right? Anything else that you're selling, you would always pay more when you're getting more, right? And so the mistake that I see people make is that they look at a property that's for sale and then they don't realize like the different revenue drivers that are needed. But if you built out a buy box, you should understand them. But sometimes you think you can still make it work even if it clearly doesn't hit the requirements, right, of what you need for it to outperform. And so the recommendation is just to stay disciplined to the buy box, stay disciplined to what works, stay disciplined to creating that and making it, and especially your first one, because you want to nail it on the first one so you don't hate Airbnb like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this thing's actually working.
A lot of people selling off from not buying on their properly on their first one. And I'm gonna put my real estate agent hat on for a minute. I've been a real estate agent for like 9 years now or something. And the two things that I thought of and appreciate that you say and know that people would counter is the first one would be, well, there's just not many deals that are hitting that buy box. And it's like, that's okay. Sometimes patience is going to be your best friend in real estate investing, because if something's not hitting that and you know it's going to work, just wait for the right property and pounce on it when it comes, because you don't want to just buy one and think you're going to make it work. That's not how data real estate investments work. And then the second part is like, one, work with a very qualified short-term rental real estate agent. I can't stress this enough. Bigger Pockets. We have the agent finder with qualified investor-friendly agents that you can go to for free and interview and all that. But go and find a real estate agent in that market that specializes in short-term rentals. Like ask them how many of their deals last year were short-term rentals. Ask them how many they own. Ask for references. That is going to help you a ton. But then the other thing is, say there's a deal that you're looking at and, say your buy box is 500,000 and you see something listed for 650. and you're like, oh, I really, if that property was 500,000, it would work. Now is the time in today's market to make some disrespectful offers. And that list price is a suggestion. I have seen so many deals be listed at some price, and some investor or whoever just was like, hey, I'll offer this number on it because it works when my numbers, and then they get it accepted. Like, yeah, are your chances as high? No. But just because something is listed at one price and your number needs to be another, there's no reason not to put in an offer on that place. The worst thing they're going to say is no, or, hell no, if it's really bad. Yeah. But that's how a lot of deals get made. I've just seen it in my agent days, from fixing and flipping to everything, that sometimes, especially right now in a buyer's market in the United States, for most places, you can make a disrespectful offer and your chances are going to be a lot higher to work, as long as you're basing it off of data to get to the number that would make the deal work. So I just want to put that out there for people to like thinking about, because when you get into this buy box thing, people are starting to get stressed because like, oh, I can't find the deal. It's like, either you make a deal work because you can get it to the number that you want to, or you be satisfied that you're not making bad decisions and you learned on how not to jump on a property that is going to hurt you. Just wanted to riff off that. So I knew you hit it on the head.
I love it. I am far more proud of the amount of people that I've stopped from buying a bad property than the amount of people I've helped buy good properties. We're at like 260 plus properties, but I'm probably in like the thousands for people that have haven't bought a bad property.
We need to figure out how to get you like a referral fee for when they don't buy one, so, and then you give me 10% as the idea creator for you. So we'll work that out off air, but
we'll pencil it out. It's fine. We'll do something together eventually. So then maybe that'll start it out.
The next step, after you've gone through those first 3 steps and you're really getting like ready to make a move on something, because you're really locked in on waiting for that right type of property to come. The next part is forecasting the revenue with real data. Why is relying on the previous owner's numbers dangerous, or looking at other properties and not fully analyzing why they're performing the way they did? Why could that be a bad route to go for people that, oh, this property made 100K, I'll be able to make 100K no matter what? Like, I hear that a lot. What are your thoughts when you hear something like that?
That's most of my strategy. You know what I mean? Like, I call it the Burger King, like it's the Burger King logic. A lot of people know this, right? McDonald's spends millions of dollars to figure out what corner to be on. Burger King opens up across the street. I don't have a formal data background, right? And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, I didn't go to school to study data. I've never even watched a video to study, like, how do I understand data? I've just looked at other Airbnbs and I saw how much they were making. And I went, well, if we just did the same thing, but better, you know what I mean? Same amenities, same design, same size, same location, but then we make it even better with maybe even more amenities and better design and whatnot, then realistically, we should perform at a similar amount, right? And you can do that quite a few times before the market, starts to dip and be like, well, now there's too many of you. You know what I mean? That's the strategy that I've always taken to be able to forecast the revenue, is like, what's everybody else doing? What are they hitting? How can I match that? And then how can I do better than that? And that's the strategy that honestly has worked extraordinarily well. Sounds too simple to be true, but again, 260 properties, all of them are profitable because we just followed that strategy. Now, at the same time, I am super cautious, right? So I see somebody making $100,000. We're going through it today. I'm looking at a property. It's a good example. It's doing $149,000, right? And I find this other property that has all the same features. And I'm like, okay, we can do $149,000. However, we're actually going to have a pool and a pickleball court on top of that. And so it's like, well, obviously we're going to get booked out for more and make more because we have like 2 major revenue drivers for that specific market. But I tell myself, I'm like, at a minimum, we can do 150. Like, of course we could, right? We're going to have the same things that these other people are doing that are making 150. So it's kind of becomes like almost like a no-brainer, right? When you think about it that way, it's like, I'm just going to match them, but add way more. And then as long as the market allows for it, in other words, like there's people willing to pay more than 150, then you can get that booking.
What are some, like as they're like looking at these revenue numbers and things like that are coming in, you need to underwrite it like a business as one of your next steps. And so in correlation with the revenue, what are some expenses that a lot of like newbie investors or amateur investors forget to include, or kind of have rose tinted glasses on and underestimate, that could kind of wreck that revenue that came into them? Because in the end, profit is what matters. Like you can make 200,000 in revenue, but if you're spending $200,000 to keep it running versus somebody that has $100,000 in revenue and $50,000 in expenses, like who's the winner there? You know, and you can debate on that on appreciation and things, but you know, what are some expenses and things that people get tripped up on that they don't think about when analyzing properties?
I would say the utility bills is what we actually see people get wrong the most, you know, especially when they come from like, oh, where's my house? You know, what's my utility bill? And then they go and assume that's going to be a similar thing when they go to the utility bill for that property, but they don't realize it has like baseboard heating and that costs significantly more. They don't realize, you know, that they have a pool heater that's going to run during like, you know, 100-degree days. And so it's like there's these little nuances when it comes to the utility bill, market by market, especially if you're not familiar with the market, that we've seen happen. We've also seen where like people will screw up the property taxes. In some markets, when you buy the property, it gets reappraised based off of what you bought it, and then the property taxes are higher.
I want to pause on that for 1 second. As a real estate agent, the amount of times I have seen people buy a property, think because the person that had it for $100,000 in 2002 or something, and they barely ever raised it, and they did a bunch of fixes, and then they buy it for $1 million, and then they get their mortgage bill after a year, and it's gone up like $1,000 a month, and they're so mind blown. But your taxes, especially in Texas, in most places, once you buy a property at that new price, it gets reassessed at that price. And you may not immediately that year hear about the taxes on your mortgage, but guaranteed that you're not even going to have an escrow shortage if you're doing escrow, but you're going to have to, make up for that, also that higher tax bill. So you'll be behind almost like 2 years basically on taxes. So just wanted to point that out and let you keep going, because I just see so many people do that and they're so mad. Like, why is my mortgage so much higher? And it's like, yeah, your property was up 5x compared to what the previous owner had it as, and the tax assessors don't realize that until it's sold. But go ahead, I just had to rant on that because I see it too much.
No, that's fine. I hate property taxes with an absolute passion. I think they're the most criminal thing. It's not even funny. Like, I remember hearing when I was younger, I'm going on a side tangent here, but I remember hearing when I was younger, people saying like, oh, in China, you can't even own the land. Like, it's a lease. You get a 99-year lease when you buy a property on the land. And I always thought, like, that's insane. Like, communism is crazy and China doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And then all of a sudden I grow up and I'm like, wait a second, none of it, you know what I mean? If I don't pay my taxes on my property, nobody owns it. We don't even get a 99-year lease. It's just, you're paying it no matter what. And Florida right now is trying to get rid of that. I'm like, it's so true. You don't own your property. You don't own your land if you have to keep paying rent to the government to live there. Anyways, different thing altogether. It's a
great tangent because it's so true. Like, I see it too often. Back on track to the expenses.
Back on track.
Hit me with it.
I want you to bring us back to the buy box, right? You've built out this buy box. Now that you've built it out, you know what drives revenue within that market and you know what to look for. You're now going onto Zillow and you're hunting for those properties. You are trying to find the property that matches your buy box criteria the best, because that's going to have the most revenue drivers or a big old moat around your property in comparison to everybody else. So you're hunting for these different little deals. And when you're doing that, each property you come across, you are forecasting what that specific property could do. Because in some scenarios, the view from one property will be better from the view from another property. And so the revenue is going to be slightly different, but it still could potentially work because the purchase price is still going to be different. And so you understand what works within the market, but every time you have a property that's in your buy box criteria, you're analyzing it to forecast what that revenue would be based on that specific property. And on top of that, you know what amenities you need to add to the property, which means you know how much money you'd have to put towards the property to get it to that revenue number. But then once you've actually gotten the revenue number for the property that you're looking at, right? Whichever one, just maybe it's the first one you look at, you forecast what the revenue is and you know how much money you're going to put towards it to actually get it up and running. When you have that knowledge, that information of revenue and the cost, you can then actually underwrite the property to figure out what the true cash on cash flow, all of that is going to be for the deal. And when you have that information, you now know if this is a 20% cash on cash or if this is a negative $20,000 a year type property, right? Like, you can actually see that clearly. Like, hey, I have all my expenses. I got everything it's going to cost to get this up and going. Here's how much it's going to make on an annual basis. What is my mortgage? What is left at the end of the year, right? I put, $100,000 into this property, and at the end of the year, it's going to cash flow $10,000. And then therefore 10,000 to the 100,000, that makes it 10% cash on cash. Cool. That's what I'm looking for. If you're in that scenario, or you're like, no, I need it to be 20% cash on cash, right? Like whatever it is, you want to go through that process of actually underwriting, because that's going to let you know if the deal that you're looking at makes sense or not. Because it can make $250,000 and still lose you money. The one example I showed you made $190,000 and still lost about $20,000, right? Because the mortgage was so expensive on that property. So that's what you want to do. But the final step that I just asked you there, right? The final step, my strongest recommendation is to repeat the underwriting and vetting of the property over and over and over and over again, as many times as you possibly can within that market. Because by doing that, you're going to figure out what the average property will make. And you'll find this sort of pattern that shows up, right? You'll notice like all of these properties that meet your buy box criteria, that are, priced properly, that kind of are in the right setup and right area. Those properties keep hitting like 10% cash on cash. Like that tends to be like where they are, right? Give or take, a couple percentage. But then what's eventually going to happen is you're going to come across a property that for whatever reason has certain features about it at a price point that, maybe the person doesn't even realize, that it has so many like awesome features for an Airbnb that property actually will do 20% cash on cash. And you've now seen so many that would do 10, and then you see this outlier doing 20, and boom, that's the one you move on. If you want to find confidence in the Airbnb space, that's the process you follow. You find a market, you build the buy box, you hunt the properties, you underwrite them over and over and over again to figure out that baseline. And when you find that outlier, you are moving as fast as you can to make sure nobody else takes that property from you, so that you can set it up and hit the numbers that you want to hit. And so that's the beauty, man. That is the beauty. And honestly, I love it because I get to do this full time. And so I get to see that over and over and over. I did it this morning. I came across one where I'm like, oh my God. I was like, this is so good. And I'm like, I hope somebody buys this today. Like it was one of those sort of deals,
I love it. I can tell how fired up you get about it. That's like true passion of trying to help people understand this. And like, that's why I genuinely love your content and like love what you do, because I can tell you get passion from helping others understand. This is a science almost in the end. It is a data driven science of sorts, of like why this property works and why this makes money and all this. And you don't just like wake up and get on Zillow and pick a property and make that happen. It comes with repetition. It comes with understanding and working with people that know this process in and out. So besides working with STR Search and reaching out to you, what's the first step that somebody could take if they want to buy their first Airbnb? Let's not even say in 2025. Let's say in 2026. What's something that they could kind of work out some of those repetition muscles, or like it's just some quick advice you could give to somebody that's watching this and made it this far and is pumped up just like you? There's one skill that you're gonna have to build. Guess which one? Understand Airbnb data, right? That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about how you're going to manage it or where all these different little things that you're going to want to eventually know. First off, let's just understand the data so you can buy a good property and then figure everything else out, right? And so my recommendation, little bias, go to my website, 100% free course. You don't even need to put in your email, 7-day Airbnb data challenge. Okay. First, you're going to learn how to understand data basics, good data, bad data, right? Then you're going to understand how to find a market, then how to build a buy box, then how to hunt for properties, then how to forecast the revenue, then how to underwrite, then how to know amenities you need. And there's all the resources in there, 100% free, 7-day challenge. Within a week, you can understand what I understand and then start putting it to practice, right? Actually getting it out there and implementing it into your markets so that you can make sure you're not making that mistake. Again, I've helped more people avoid bad deals and I've helped people find good deals. So then therefore, start there. I can't recommend it enough. It is the go-to resource for this. No, I completely agree. We'll make sure to put all this in the description below, links to everything for you. Where can people, if they wanted to reach out or catch more of your content that you've been crushing it with lately, what's your Instagram and how can they find that? Which we'll put in the description as well, but go ahead and shout it out for everybody. The Airbnb Data Guy. That's what I go by everywhere. That's what most people know him as. Anytime I'm like, oh yeah, John, most people now know your name because you've done a great job with branding recently. But I remember when I was first getting further in the space, people were like, oh yeah, the Airbnb Data Guy. And I thought it was like a shtick or something. But I was like, no, like he literally is the guy that understands how to bring this data to the forefront. So I think it's really cool, like seeing your personal brand evolve, and then everything you're working with at STR Search. So appreciate you for coming on. To kind of wrap up everything in one line is, don't chase tax breaks, chase solid deals. That is the best way to win in this. Understand the data. Don't make a emotionally driven decision. Take some time and learn this process, because you can't it's very hard to come back if you buy a bad deal to begin with. It's almost, I don't want to say impossible, but it's tough. We'll put it that way. And you've seen it more than anybody. So if you did make it this far in the video, please hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions for John or you want him to come back on for another episode, which I'm sure we will do very soon. And we'll see y'all in the next episode. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all have a good day.